So welcome to our class in strategic management. We're going to look at a number of key themes in the course. Will require participation and contributions afterwards. So let's begin by talking about leadership. So in research, leadership is one thing that in strategic management, leadership is one key thing that never misses. So we need to understand the types of leadership styles that are there and also align them to strategic management. So leadership, by definition, refers to the different approaches that leaders will use to guide, to direct, to manage their teams towards achieving their organizational goals. And so each style has its strengths and weaknesses. It also has its best fit context. So when we talk about autocratic, it's a type of leadership where the leader will make decisions independently with little or no input from the team members. Example, we can talk about ZESCO management. It operates under an autocratic model. It operated under an autocratic model before the reforms. So decisions were such that the firm concentrated on expansion and pricing models. These ones were decisions that were made at an executive level and was limited to a few for consultation. Advantages of autocratic leadership is that decisions are quick and clear, and disadvantage is that there's risk of low morale because you limit creativity because you don't involve those in the lower levels. We also have democratic leadership where leaders in this type of leadership, they encourage participation and collaboration to make decisions. So everyone has an opinion that is valid. We can look at companies like Stanbic. It uses a democratic kind of leadership within the use of teams. It allows employees at all levels to contribute their ideas when it comes to decisions to do with a new brand. Advantages of this type of leadership is that there's higher employee engagement, there's innovation. The disadvantages is that decision making can be slow as you involve almost everyone in the decision making process. We also have transformational leadership style, where leadership is mainly focused on inspiring and motivating employees to achieving extraordinary outcomes in the process. So here we're looking at developing their own strategy in terms of leadership capacity. So examples we can look at here, maybe Sanaco, which has a transformational leadership style, which played a very crucial role in the digital market banking revolution. So they were pushing for innovation and customer-centered services. Advantages of transformational leadership is that there's high innovation, there's strong motivation, and disadvantages that it can be exhausting. And at times, this kind of leadership may be overused without proper systems. We also have a type of leadership which is the laissez-faire. It's a type of leadership approach where leaders will provide lead to supervision. They trust more in employees to making the decisions. Examples could be in common Zambian startups like fintech companies. Okay. We've seen a lot of fintech companies come in. The advantages are that it encourages independence and creativity, but there's a risk of lack of direction. So this is with regards to leadership. What type of leadership style would you recommend will depend on the type of structure you have. All right, so we also talk about strategy formulation. What is a strategy? And what are some of the steps that are involved in strategy formulation? When we're talking about strategy, we're basically looking at what? We're looking at the process by which companies will define their direction and they'll outline how they will achieve those directions. So there are steps that are involved in strategy formulation. Number one, there is vision and mission setting. So here, the vision will define the future prospects of an organization. So the mission will state what the organization's core purpose and focus will be. So the first step is vision and mission setting. So the vision is basically what defines the future to which the organization wants to go. The mission is simply the core purpose and focus that the institution wants to be. An example, we can look at Zamtel's vision or to expand in the rural settings. Okay, what's the vision statement that Zamtel has? MTN is what? Everywhere you go. Or Zamtel, what do they say? So the vision basically was to expand even in the rural areas across Zambia. So much as you do your answering of these papers, fortify so much on what? On Zambianizing your examples. The second will be environmental analysis, which involves the SWOT and PESTEL analysis. The SWOT and PESTEL analysis. So can somebody explain what is involved in the SWOT and the PESTEL analysis?
For the SWOT analysis, this is the analysis which is done for the internally for the organizations. It looks at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and threats for the organization. While as for the PESTEL is external, focusing on the political environment, the economic environment, the social environment, technological, and the environment itself as well as the legal conditions.
Okay, that's good. And the SWOT has definitions. There are two that are centered on the internal and two that are centered on the external. So can you explain on how the SWOT analysis is used when it comes to environmental analysis, scanning? So you're doing GRIM 640?
No, that's what it is.
Yes, set up the anyone? How do we use the, the SWOT analysis to analyze the internal and external?
For the SWOT analysis, how we analyze the internal, we look at the strengths the organization has and its weaknesses internally. And externally, we look at the opportunities it has out there and the threats which are out there, which affects it out there.
Okay, I really need participation from the group. I think there are only a few people that are really taking part in this. Okay, so as we brainstorm, it'll be very important that we all be part and parcel. So under environmental analysis, so before the strategies are now developed, the internal and external environment must be assessed. Now, when these have to be assessed, it will help identify the factors that will impact what the strategic process. So the SWOT analysis will identify the internal tools, and of the internal tools, we have what? The strengths and weaknesses. The external tools, we have the opportunities and threats. So this will help in aligning our internal capabilities with the external possibilities and challenges. Then the PESTEL analysis is used as a framework to scan the external macro environment in terms of political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal factors. So the example that we can look at in this context would be the changing, with the changing policies. Okay, so in Zambia, we know policies are usually changing. So an adjustment to policies like the taxes, these must be considered. So a rise in taxes might affect profitability, whilst the tax incentives might create what growth opportunities. Right. So the third step in the strategic process is strategy design. So with environmental insights that we have done, the organization will now design strategies that will align with their vision and mission. So this will involve us selecting a competitive positioning. So we have cost leadership and differentiation. Under cost leadership here, institutions want to become the lowest cost producer in the industry. Okay, so for instance, ShopRite, it may want to offer the most affordable retail products to tap a wider customer base. In terms of differentiation, you'd want to provide unique products and services that will justify the premium prices. For instance, the earlier would want to differentiate themselves through sustainable practices. And the third step that is involved is implementation planning. So after you've designed a strategy, you need to come up with a detailed planning. So the detailed planning here will involve you breaking down the strategic goals into SMART objectives, which are specific, are measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So in implementation, there's an activity of allocation of resources where you're going to assign people, finances, and technology efficiently. Then you need to set timelines and assign responsibilities to different departments. So here you also need to communicate a plan clearly across all levels of the organization to ensure that there is a buy-in. So these are the steps that are involved. And the last step is monitoring and evaluation. So we know that there's no complete strategy without mechanisms that will ensure that there's no strategy that is complete without mechanisms. So organizations must use KPIs aligned to strategic goals. There should be regular reviews conducted to identify the successes and challenges. There should also be flexibility. Strategies must also evolve to respond to these emerging trends and risks. So these are some of the steps that we must look at when we are dealing with what? Strategy formulation. So vision setting, environmental scanning, strategy designing, implementation, planning, and monitoring and evaluation. So the 5 steps are involved when you're dealing with what? Strategy formulation. Are there any questions so far? I'll ask questions from our exam paper. So I'm just doing an overview of what we have covered or been covering, so that as we answer some of the questions from past paper, we may be able to remember. Then we talked about the concept of an anagram. Has anyone ever heard of this term? What is an organogram of an organization? What does it do? How important is it in terms of strategy implementation? Why are organograms important? And why are they used? Okay. So an organogram is simply an organizational chart. It uses a visual diagram to outline the internal structure of an organization. So it will illustrate the hierarchies, the roles, the line authorities, the communications between positions. It will ensure that everyone understands how the organization is structured. So every organization should have an organogram. For instance, we can look at a typical hospital. Okay, we have how is the organogram like in the civil service? We have the hospital administrator. Then we have the structure. Can somebody give me maybe a structure of a hospital? Annie, how's the structure like? Who's at the top? Who's at the bottom?
This one is a bit complex.
Or
This one is a bit complex.
okay, let me just assume you have the administrator.
Let me just give you one for maybe an ordinary ministry, where you have a minister up there, the honorable minister. Then he is deputized by the permanent secretary. Then from the permanent secretary, we have a line of directors. The director HR, director finance, director, any technical departments which are involved, and director planning. And from the directors, we have the assistant directors. From the assistant directors, we have the chiefs. From the chiefs, we have the seniors, then the officers at the bottom there.
So these are important to know in the sense that, number one, they provide you with a clear view of the organization's hierarchy. They help in the staff understanding their roles and responsibility. Organograms are important for accountability because they help define reporting relationships. In the army, they follow so much of such, who reports to who, the role that each person has specifically. Also talks about the communication channels. A well-organized organogram will help in streamlining communication to reduce confusion, to ensure that the messages pass through the correct channels and that there's efficiency in operations of knowing who does what, and also allows for faster decision-making. It will allow that there's a reduction in duplication of efforts and will lead to efficient works. Organograms are important. Now, we also talked about another aspect in our discourse to do with HR functions. What are the HR functions and how the HR functions support strategic goals, right? So HR functions and how they support strategic goals. So let's look at what HR functions are all about and how they help in supporting organizational goals. So HR is one of the important departments for every organization at the heart of success, because to ensure that the right people with the right skills are motivated. So HR practices are directly linked to execution and success. So without effective HR, most of the well-designed strategies can fail. So here are some of the main functions of HR. Number one is that of recruitment. All right. So HR is involved in attracting and identifying the best candidates who fit for both technical and cultural needs. So recruitment is one of the strategies aligned with organizational goals. The second role that HR has is that of training and development. So HR has training and development roles. So here, employees who have opportunities to upgrade their skills, to expand their knowledge. Okay. So these are some of the roles that HR has. What other roles does HR have? What other roles does HR play or have? At least you need to know 5 roles that HR will play. Training. It also has roles of performance management and employee engagement. So HR has a duty to play in terms of what? Performance management. So performance management is about aligning individuals and teams with the organization's objectives. It involves goal setting. It involves performance management using KPIs. It involves feedback and coaching, and also involves rewards and recognition. So a strong performance management will help systems ensure that there's high employee productivity. The other role that HR has is that of employee engagement, to foster a workplace where employees will feel valued, motivated, and committed. So HR will use employee engagement surveys, suggestion schemes, recognition rewards, and wellness programs. So a high engagement will correlate with increased productivities. Any other role that HR plays?
Compensation and benefits as well.
All right, consultation as well. Okay. So what other roles that HR play? They manage employees, benefits and compensation, grievance handling. Exactly, yeah. Okay. So at least you must know these are roles: recruitment and staffing, performance management, compensation and benefits, compliance with the labor laws, organization development, safety, um, data management, and strategic planning. So all these are roles that HR plays. Okay. So we also looked at issues to do with rejoinder issues. What are rejoinder issues? What are rejoinder issues? Anyone? Or what is a rejoinder? So when you're dealing with a rejoinder, we're basically looking at what? It's a formal written response that is submitted to address points raised in an earlier reply. Okay. What is a rejoinder? And we had situations where we had rejoinder issues at our workplaces. So these are some components. So when we are talking about a rejoinder, it's a formal written reply, which is made when someone needs to respond to points that have been raised by another party. So a rejoinder usually happens when after a complaint has been made or a protest or an earlier statement. It is used in situations where there's a disagreement or dispute. So it helps in the responding party to clarify some of the misunderstandings, also to defend their actions, and also to counter some of the accusations. So in strategic management or human resource, a rejoinder is an important aspect we must know, which gives a fair chance for parties to be heard before a trial decision is made. So in simple words, when you're talking about rejoinder, we're like saying, here is my side of the story after hearing what the other people say. So rejoinders are used in many contexts, in legal proceedings, in court where one party responds to reply on the other side. For instance, if a defendant makes a new claim in court, so the complainant will file in what is called a rejoinder. It is also used in procurement appeals where companies who lost some government contract can protest a decision. All right. So this was just a by the way of the things that I think were highlighted in an audio done by your lecturer. So we also went through some of these questions over and over, where most of the key aspects were discussed. So in our discourse during the week, we talked about strategic decision making. We talked about factors that influence strategic decision making. What are some of the factors that influence strategic decision making? We looked at internal source capabilities. So internal resources and capabilities is the availability of financial and human and technological resources. These are some of the factors we talked about that influence strategic decision making. We also talked about organizational structure and culture, the hierarchies, the communication flow. We talked about the leadership styles. We talked about the stakeholder interests, where you balance the needs of the stockholders, the employees, and the customers. Okay, so these are some of the factors that will influence strategic decision making, and how we ensure that there's an alignment between strategy and business objectives. You need to have clear communication top to down. You need to have smart objectives, like I mentioned earlier, continuous monitoring and employee involvement, depending on the type of leadership that you have, where you include employees at all stages. Okay. So strategic decision making is important in organizations. Are we following all together? So I'm trying to cover as much as possible. So when we're dealing with strategic decision making is very important in organizations that make long-term goals. So the ability that an organization has to make informed decisions, the ability that an organization has to shape the direction of the organization, the influence that they have in their positioning, all would depend on the strategic decisions that they are making. So those factors that you are seeing here are some of the key factors that influence strategic decisions. So the internal resources, but generally resources, this is one of the most critical factors that will influence strategic decisions, is on the availability of resources from inside and their capabilities. So resources may not only be financial, they can also be in terms of human capital or technological expertise. So where we have a company with a large budget and highly skilled workforce and advanced technology, these may help pursue aggressive expansion strategies. They'll help in investing heavily in research and development and enter new markets. The other factor that will affect strategic decision making is organizational structure and culture. So in terms of organizational structure and culture, we know that the way an organization is structured and their culture will help cultivate significantly the impact in decision making. So the hierarchy that organizations have, the decisions that they make from top to bottom through the ranks, whether it's decentralized or centralized, will determine how decisions will be made. So in decentralized structures, we know that decision making authority is spread across different levels of organizations. So it's easy to promote, to have quicker responses. It's easy to have greater innovation. However, the structure can also have inconsistencies. It has its own demerits. We may have difficulties in aligning with organizational goals, because if you over decentralized, some of the departments may want to come up with something that is off the strategic direction. So the organization structure, culture, on the other hand, when we're talking about culture, we emphasize that we're talking about what? The common beliefs, the norms that the company has. So this plays a very key role in shaping the decision making. So if you have a strong, cohesive culture that aligns well with organization goals, it can help to align the decision makers around a common vision. Where you have a fragmented culture, this may lead to some confusion, may lead to some misalignment in strategic decisions. Okay, so you need to give examples of your workplaces in a scenario where such is done. The other is leadership style and experience. So leaders play an important role in shaping strategic decisions. So a visionary leader with experience in the industry will most likely make decisions than a leader with a more conservative, a more risk-averse style. So experienced leaders are typically more adept at recognizing opportunities and making bold moves, whereas those that are less experienced may only rely on their conventional wisdom from the school, from their training, and usually avoid risks. So the leadership styles are important because they will help impact the way these teams will approach these strategic challenges. I talked about the types of leadership, like transformational leaders, for instance. They are mainly to inspire and motivate teams to go beyond their status quo, whereas transactional leaders will mainly focus on maintaining stability and efficiency. Okay, so these leaders have an impact on how they shape decision making. The other factor or ingredient is stakeholder interest. So strategic decisions can involve balancing the needs and expectations of multiple stakeholders. So these stakeholders will include the employers, the customers, the suppliers, the community. So each stakeholder may have different goals, and these goals are the ones that can help sometimes to solve or cause conflicts. So stakeholders may sometimes focus on maximizing profits, while other employees may be focused on ensuring that there's job security or having better work conditions. So customers, on the other hand, may want lower prices, and suppliers will want to have long-term contracts. So when you have effective decision making, it will require you considering the interests of all these stakeholders, having to balance to supporting each of them. The other factor that will influence strategic decision making is risk appetite. So every organization have different levels of risk tolerance. Some organizations are willing to take up high risks, others are risk averse. By averse, we mean avoid what risks. So companies that have a high risk appetite are influenced by factors like their financial health, market position, and leadership philosophy. So a company that has strong cash flows, maybe like Trade Kings, may want to take up risks by diversifying in a lot of avenues, producing soaps, drinks, beverages. In contrast, an organization that is facing financial challenges may want to focus on a conservative strategy to reduce on costs, just streamline on one aspect of the product line. They are careful when it comes to risks. So these are some of the factors that we have talked about that will affect what strategic decision making. All right. Now, how do we ensure that there's a linkage between strategy and business objectives? The following can be done. Number one, by ensuring there's clear communication. Ensuring there's what? Clear communication. How is that done? Ensuring that there's what? Clear communication. So by clear communication, this is one of the most important steps that will ensure that there's alignment with communication. The top management must be sure that the company's strategic goals are being translated downwards. The vision must be communicated clearly to all levels. So this will ensure that everyone, starting from the senior leaders, the frontline employees, everyone understands where the company is heading to. And so they will direct all their efforts to ensuring that the overall objectives are met. There should be regular meetings, briefings, internal communication to help organization keep on track on the same page. For instance, Coca-Cola Zambia, it is known for aligning global strategies with local markets wherever, be it in Zambia, Malawi. So they have decentralized decision making to allowing local managers subsequent countries to ensure that they tailor their strategies in their regions with what the global vision for Coca-Cola is. So this is one of the examples that you should remember in exams when it comes to that. Ensuring that the decisions, the objectives are smart. So managers must get specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound objectives. These must align with the organization's overall strategy. So these objectives must provide what? A clear roadmap for achieving strategic goals and must help ensure that the progress is tracked and monitored over time. They must also set smart objectives at all levels. This will help the focus and direction be centered on the same page or outcomes. The third way is in continuous monitoring. So it is essential that monitoring is done continuously so that this strategy remains aligned with the actual business objectives. So there should be regular assessment to allow the managers to identify the potential issues early and make adjustments where necessary. So this will involve having quarterly reviews, feedback from key stakeholders. Lastly, but not the least, there should be employee involvement. So employees at all levels of the strategic decision-making process must be involved to ensure that they create alignment. So when employees understand the goals of the organization, the input will be fortified. So we, in a nutshell, can say that